Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your interest in this panel. We're going to be talking about something that we were talking about. Actually, we actually did have the panel in the hallway, but it's something that's complicated. How to transform the PPPs, public-private alliances. How to transform public-private alliances or partnerships using technology, innovation, new ideas of startups, scale-ups, new digital suppliers. How to transform something that is complex as it is. Why do we all believe here that this makes sense? Because this collaboration can have an impact first in many of the public services or utilities. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about transportation, mobility, um, water, sanitation, health, education, infrastructure, public services that is that last mile that is much closer to the citizen has a lot of space for use where new technologies can have a lot of sense. So second, because PPPs, due to their nature, are long term. They can be even left out for many years consistently. You can experiment on, you can try out things, you can implement new digital solutions. Third, which I think is very important, and we're seeing that today because these kind of PPPs have diverse funding sources such as public, private, multilateral that may be a source for that scalability and that replicability of those prototypes and solutions that are being piloted into PPP logics. And as we were saying before, because not necessarily the companies that third party companies that are winning this kind of bid and projects or contracts are the most innovative. Therefore, in relationship with these innovative ecosystems and this kind of new companies makes sense, particularly with this kind of company that are providing this kind of infrastructure or service third-party companies. With this summary, I'm going to introduce the panel that we have today. I can tell you that it's going to be a very interesting conversation. We have had it already in a very organic way. We have here today, and they're going to comment a little bit more about their experience, but we have Carla Bertoco Tindari. She's chair of the board of directors of based state in Sao Paulo, and a partner is Mario Capital in Brazil. Lucia Marta is the chief of open innovation in Peru, Marti. She's the chief of Aguera Telefonica, actually. And lastly, Ricardo Fonseca. He is works in environmental manager in Petrovias. So now, more than talking about their trajectory in their careers, I wanted to ask them, with this experience that they're bringing to the table regarding the technology of new ideas and open innovation and PPPs, I wanted to ask them about it. So you're going to start, Carla? I'm sorry for not speaking in Spanish. And particularly, I wanted to talk about the innovation of the infrastructure of a concept that can speak about innovation as I was said in the panel in the morning, it's more of a hostile environment of um, procurement, public purchases and controls. Many times it's a lot of energy that is being spent to find a solution in the more strict impacts. And also when we're talking about a PPP, we also see what has to do with energy and financing that is ensured for the project, for the innovation that is required. The most important thing is also that the public needs to know what needs to be solved. And in these situations are not going to be successful if we don't know fully about them. So therefore, we need to find the most innovative public and the companies because that may help us reach the users and have them reach the public-private services with their demands. in order to have this kind of responses. So we have some data for us where we have seen 84 bidding processes in order to have an open innovation or tendering processes, and also 116 contracts, as we said before, because in 10 months you can do a procurement, but maybe have some kind of incentive, and sometimes the people don't have the right of IP rights. I think that the most important point in the PPP environment, I was remembered a case that we worked on years ago. We wanted to hire in railway concessions solution, digital solutions, payments like QR codes, and so I wanted to specify the solution. So I would say, okay, I want a specific solution. Or for example, about connectivity. So we are talking about internet is Wi-Fi. And now the companies bring solutions that, for example, are IoT. So with the contract with the government is to specify the solution. And they're the third parties to answer the question. I think that they are heard by one in four alternatives. So the first one is when they identify that the alternative, that startup, that solution, is going to bring a great benefit, a reduction of operational budgets. So if that solution brings a value to reduce, in fact, operational costs, then the third-party companies have a great incentive without provocation. So then the challenge has to balance the forces in procurement of a big company, a concession company, a multinational, and a small company, which is a startup. Then the second point, um, from having an incentive to bringing a higher level of competitivity in a tendering process. Then I'm going to bring some examples of something that we saw, that the solution of a certain startup allowed for a big concession company of water and sewage companies. It brought it to be more competitive through a procurement process. So they also look for a startup. Then the other pathway to grow is to have that big concession company, third-party contract, that is trying to look for investment opportunities. Okay, something is very expensive today. I don't have all that much money. But many times you have the third-party company, contracting company, that need to prioritize certain phase of the service providing, and then they think about technology with a vision of a second moment with the acquisition of one of those solutions that may improve their business. And then I find that the last point is when there is an assistance about a certain aspect, digital or with a contract, which might happen that I have a device, the legal documents that demand something that only a startup is going to be able to do, it can be brought, or some regulatory innovation, many times from a regulatory sandbox, which the regulatory bodies tend to adopt, and then the company has to look for that innovation, and then they end up hiring a startup. But in any of those situations, I think that the important thing here is that relationship between the big company and the small company, in order for people to match innovation or limit to one only service provider, or even the public body in a province or or a state. So that is kind of the overview of what we have in Brazil.
Estar todo el rato así.
So now that you have started with the conversation, I'm going to go with the next presentation. This that you have mentioned, is this something that you have so in Brazil? I mean, do you have like a contact network and like an entrepreneurship ecosystem that is brutal? Witness of this. I have seen the rest of the companies in Latin America, these startups, think a lot before starting working in Brazil. And there is a hard environment or hard climate. So this thing about the PPPs is something that you have considered or not yet. This is reflected on the public private partnerships in order to be able to hire a specific startup with innovation. Sometimes they don't have the internal knowledge and it's mandatory for them to hire them. So we see that today the concessionaires are haven't had advantages of this big ecosystem, this strong ecosystem, and they try to have this internal solution. And if they don't get this, we have this kind of bids. This is something that happened 2 years ago. Some concessionaires today fund provide with funds. We started with the Itaú Bank, and then they'll have new services that are financed by vertical companies. Yeah, it was kind of difficult to understand this. Could you explain us your position and how the both institutions work together? And also, starting with the compensation, from your position, can we incentive this new reasoning of PPP? Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. Well, first, the institution I'm representing today is about the agreement between government and government, Peru and France. Currently, we have three mega projects in Peru. Basically, we use the standard agreements, the FIDI, and we also have different clauses or technical specifications about the innovations and good practices that the company have had or the French group in some projects in some countries and how this is being implemented in the national framework. This is in order to add this and to provide them with a structure and have a specific products that they can be materialized so we can have a technical report and that we can make sure that this is executed during the construction phase. How do we make notice uh, disappear during the first stage? How can we work in a collaborative manner? How can we collaborate with these other actors so that we can continue with this strategic action so that we can execute each one of the phases? When we started this thinking about these strategies and we were collecting the data, we identified that the clauses, we didn't want the clauses to be that flexible. We wanted to have an approach to innovation, but at the same time, we wouldn't want to provide them with difficulties so that we can execute the project. In this manner, we're going step by step. I'm going to tell you about some successful cases, but this is focused on the local market, on the expertise from the different companies, and with this, we can set the rhythm in this market. In this case, we manage the project. We're not a consultancy agency. We are a company that works with technical assistance. We work with the Ministry of Transport and Communication through Propiedad Nacional. So through them, we manage that consultancy, archaeology, metallurgy, everything that we need in order to work on the mega project. So we implement all of it, not just the good practices, but all the innovation strategies. So as you mentioned, I mean, you must know a lot about these strategies. In order to have these innovation clauses, you need to be in touch with these innovation actions so that you can include this or apply this during the bids. Yeah, we had some projects in which sometimes what we call innovative, it's something that has been already implemented in France or any other countries many years ago. So we noticed that the response of the market, I mean, the company says, okay, we can do this, we can implement this strategy, but at the same time, I have these kind of restrictions. I mean, providers, I mean, data, or the climate change, or the carbon footprint. So from this, we start thinking about how we can manage this. We try to build a bridge between the different companies that have implemented certain pilot programs and the consultant agencies can get that information and use them in their favor. So this is a complex process because of the information, because of the data that sometimes is restricted in some cases, but at the same time it's a process that is moving forward. So in summary, there are like three ways of doing this. First, we need a proposal, a value proposal that makes sense and that is focused on a specific market and this makes sense in order to be part of the specific market. And secondly, we require the percentage of the bid that goes to innovation. Usually, it is managed internally. Or third, you have tried having the open innovation clauses. For example, you have sub agreements with the different companies. So the innovation is focused, for example, in climate change, renewable energy, ecological identity, flora and fauna. And within the program framework, these are the things that we're working on. I think I have already mentioned renewable energies, but this provides with added value. We have the concessionaires and the consulting agencies that work this. But something that we have is the transfer plan. This is from the PMO. We have signed three agreements with three main universities in Peru, the National University in Callao, the National University of Engineering, and another University of Engineering as well. We so they are part of the construction sector, and this is how we create the open innovation so that we can build that bridge with the consulting institutions. This is a collaborative work and it is not from the PMO itself. It's also a mechanism of economic development and promoting innovation within Peru, right? It's a very interesting topic. Lucy, I haven't forgot about you. So here we have Guaira. Of course, you know a lot about this, the corporative innovation. Can you also explain about the REMP case, which is the train um, service in Spain, which is not innovative as a user? I'm saying this as a user. But how, as being part of REMP, how this was this a case of open innovative case, and how did you enter the market?
Perfect. Well, the project with Renfe happened in about 2018, and well, there was a tendering like Waira, which is the hub of open innovation of the Telefonica group. We participated in that tender, and what Renfe was looking for back then was to try to transform actually this experience of the user, this UX, traditional UX of a traditional company, traditional railway company, and be able to do it through open innovation, right? So, under this framework that was established for the tender, they were looking to create a hub for innovation, to scout startups, accelerate them, and pilot. That is what was being thought about. We participated, we won as Waira, and we built or co-created alongside Renfe a lab that was named Trail Lab. And in Trail Lab, there was actually a lot of evolution. It wasn't, from the start what it is now. And I think that there is where we learn many many strategies that are not necessarily applicable for the reality that was being lived. Initially, those startups that were participating on the program and that were chosen, they were receiving an award in cash, which was 50,000 euros. But very swiftly, we started to realize that that wasn't actually going to generate innovation and it wasn't going to generate any change because there was no incentive in terms of the user areas of working with these startups that were being accelerated. So there was a change, and actually, this was a work that was done with the lawyers of the company in order to modify that logic and beyond the cash that in the end for the startup was great to be received, to modify the rules of the game in order for these companies to have certain assistance and follow-up in order to participate of tenders with the government or public companies and to be hired not just for pilots but for much bigger commercial powers. So the rules of the game were changed. Part of this benefit for the startups was to follow up with them, accompany them for them to participate with these processes, and to do it anonymously. And so that the evaluators wouldn't know that those were startups and that they had been through this program so that they could compete in an equal field. So that actually started to become more dynamic, the possibility of working between startups and companies, public companies in Spain. Actually, it would provide the startup the option of accessing bigger contracts. There was a couple of contracts that even got like €1 million, and that is actually what started transforming that dynamic that was being generated through this innovation lab. That was a little bit the evolution that happened throughout those 3 years that we were working with Renfe. And that is very interesting because that has happened many times, starting with big corporations and identifying ecosystems. And so, to think I want to be close to stars without thinking how in the public sector is hard because of the procurement of big corporations. You don't even know. But that's kind of what we wanted, that logic of acceleration. Okay, I gave you 50,000 and you do this, but how am I able to buy this value proposal? We have seen a great change in the last 5 years here. I'm going to continue with you, Lucia, but first, round A question. Do you think it's called concessionaire? So these concessionary companies, do you think they like the fact that they are being sort of forced to innovate in the tendering? Because we're talking about concessions that have very small margins. In the big infrastructures of water, sewage, railroads, they work with volumes, but the net percentage for the company might be 2-3%. So these companies that I don't know, so there's a concession and millions, but the margin is very low. So I work with a volume, and you have so many risks. Now you're telling me that beyond that, I need to innovate. So how do they feel about that? Yeah, I think that in a general rule, it's not a innovative profile that they have. They need to leave the comfort zone. It's not going to change. But I think it has to do with the incentives. The, the regulation company that was public and now it's private, a, a regulator, some obligations for this new contract. So then, in the first 4 or 5 years, the first cycle, the profits of efficiency were incorporated by the concessionaire. but they are shared with the users. We have a higher incentive to innovate rapidly. If the reduction of costs or more profit was coming, that resource would stay with me. And as you said, since the margins in many of those services of infrastructure and so on, those are very low margins. Then this innovation is bringing a very important differential. So, for example, an example that we feel is important, the regulator, for example, has determined that all of the 12 million inhabitants of Sao Paulo should have their water service measured with telemetry. Today, I have a person that goes the whole month and they do the reading of the meter. First, it was a person, a staff, in-out staff. Now it's a third-party staff. But I'm spending money in the meanwhile. I have people going in the visit, and I only have one information a month. Once a month, a person is going to go and read the meter. And when I call the IT, first there's going to be a cost for equipment, technology, because I don't know how to work with it. I don't know what is the best thing, the best network, if the technology network ABC. So there is a cost for learning. But then immediately, when I do it, we had the first pilot program. It was so great that the company itself decided to accelerate. So they saw that they couldn't do it by themselves. And there was a internal training. So I need to do it fast because I need to make money, and I could make it my own instead of making it someone else's. So I reduce costs. So the company hired uh, third parties, small, medium-sized companies, to do this work in an accelerated way and improve or develop in parallel an AI model that detects frauds. And we do have many frauds of those people consuming the water and not paying for it, and simply uh, tampering with the meter not to pay. And I didn't know because I only was measuring once a month, and I didn't have such a clear pattern of consumption. And now I have several measurements so I can identify that fraud. So at that point, I have all of the interest in innovating. I have a financial clear incentive. That is what moves companies. And also, in terms of the companies, these are not companies that are innovative. They don't usually go to innovative events with like Zausabi that we have in Spain. They're not in those contexts that, in a way, you know how important it is an idea for the organizations PPP Americas. We need to do a section for startups, providing solutions to big infrastructures. They should be included in the conversation. Lucia, you had a lot of examples of working with corporations. Of course, we're talking about if we want in the PPPs to have the innovation in the end. The important thing is for the concessionaire company to be able to identify those use cases, approach the ecosystem, try, make pilots, whatever works, and then be able to integrate that value proposal in their own value proposal. It's a lot. So how do the companies structure, in your experience with other corporations? It's okay if it's not concessionaires, because I think we're all in the same field.
Well, in our experience, innovation in general is part of this, these corporations, these public companies, through this innovation area that is finally in charge. But in practice, if we don't have a clear articulation with the user area, which is the one that has to come and that needs in the long term to execute the solution, in reality, nothing happens. And well, we try to execute this, but at the same time, we're like an arm. We're trying to explain them and show similar cases that help them understand that this should be articulated between the innovation user area, support area. The support areas are legal, procurement, systems, etc. Have to try to give them the whole picture of this whole articulation and not just go to well try to have this innovation project in order to comply with a specific KPI. When we get them to understand this idea and we create this governance model in which we have different responsible, it's there when we see that the projects are moving forward and that beyond a pilot program, what we want to is to generate a real change about the specific need, a real need. In our experience, we have worked in projects in which we have worked with a bit directly. For example, the CIBLA project that is focused on generating this articulation in a democratized way between the corporate and the startups. And this is the approach that we are always looking for when you're part of innovation. I mean, you want to do this, but we need to involve the user areas from the co-creation principle from the start of this need so that we can have this medium long term vision, and this is not just a pilot program. This is what has worked for us. And well, there are many different ways of doing this. For example, creating committees or having certain report lines for direct report, whether it's for the CEO or maybe the directors, the board directors, even them. We believe that this is like a cascade. So we're always looking forward to having the heads involved in these kind of projects. And actually, sometimes it's funny for me because sometimes we speak internally with the team and and we say, okay, but this is a logical thing. But when you talk with other companies that are just entering or starting with these innovation topics, no, this is not logical. Sometimes this is the reason why this doesn't last in time because they remain isolated. But well, there are many examples. For example, in Latin America, I think Global also has this. I say this as a case of the Latin American case, but we also have the Spanish cases. For example, YI, we have an action and we have an innovation idea. We see the challenges. We have the innovation unit, and this is very expensive. But I believe that there are people from other companies, other concessionaires that have companies that are very similar to yours and that are not doing this. And I don't think this is good or bad. I think this is kind of complicated to decide. But there are spaces and there is innovation within the company so that they can work on these projects. Ricardo, were you about to mention something? We were talking about the bids, the incentives, I mean, but you, as a public institution, how did you make sure that the thing that your mission is going to happen according to the innovation logics? I haven't been part of the PPPs, but we work with bids, with tenders. We work on innovation bids, and we see a lot of good ideas. We do this a lot, but as we were mentioning, we need to verify how we generate this verifying capacity. So the we're generating this with this project within the public sector. Well, these are day to day in our projects, especially because when you have a series of guidelines, innovation guidelines that are part of the agreement clauses. Well, the compliance and the reports, the deliverables are part of it, and you with this you generate aggregated value or added value to the project. we have had many lessons because many times we try to adapt or to use what has been working in another project, but when we face our local reality, the reality is different. And this, for example, we have the central highway. We wanted to have this 85 kilometers highway, and we started with 400 meters, and then we went up to over 4,000 meters over sea level. So we apply different strategies to reduce noise, to be more efficient during the different stages in terms of construction. Or, for example, when and these strategies work in order to reduce the costs for these companies, well, for the implementation and development during the next stage, we can see the results. So this is about the operations and the maintenance, and therefore this is a very difficult job, but we monitor this. We have experts that support us along this process, and finally we are honest in terms of understanding that the projects are moving forward, and there are many difficulties that in terms of the tenders, because sometimes the innovation is really good, it could be ideal, but in reality some companies do not want to risk it because it's not viable, or maybe because it's just mandatory from the government. But the main thing is that we need to follow up what we have established from the beginning. We need to have the reports, the deliverables. How do we picture this in the long term? We need to monitor the construction phase, and this is how we visualize the project. And there are many ways of doing this. We see how the electrical vehicles are being implemented in other countries. This has been already standardized. Also, we have other cases in which we use the electrical points, electrical charging points. So there are many things that we're doing. We have been working with the Ministry of Transport and Communication. For example, we have the example of other countries that have been working on similar things, and with this we have said we are able to set the new trends. So coming back to the question, how does this have an effect on the economic part of this of the country? Because we see this technological part that is very important, which means that we're not just positioning the country, but at the same time we are having this industrial policy. I don't know if it's just 1% of the concessionaires amount can be used in the innovation area, and this is very surprising. I mean, there are a lot of good opportunities. We're talking about the PPPs in general. We're not talking about the alliances in terms of health or transport or education. In our experience, um, which ones are more important and why? I don't know who wants to answer this.
So, and there's something very clear that is being implemented are the BIMs, or geographic information systems for projects. Not just in terms of visualizations, but cost savings and follow-ups that are very well implemented. Those are being standardized for all of the projects in each one of the stages. In terms of railways, right? Yes, because now that you're mentioning it, that was very oriented to vertical buildings. But for pure infrastructure such as railways, we didn't have much of an advancement. Now it's being developed for the projects in this way, and even in the beginning we were saying it's innovative, but now it's been normalized. So it's part of the cross-sectional axis of the projects. And does somebody have any other example, a vertical that is innovated in a way, or any other technology that is trending or interesting? So from my perspective, everything that has to do with sustainability has been a little bit has received more attention since from the capital. Um, Maybe AI and sustainability are still ways that receive more funding. And in the part of the companies also, the part of the concessionaires for electric energy, energy efficiency, that is receiving a lot of AI applied for energy efficiency and in water also. Everything that has to do with energy and water, I think that there's a more of a call for innovation. And preferably, at least what I perceive um, where I work, there is a big question in terms of how it's going to happen, the use of AI in public services. So have it be railroads and other utilities, and companies are looking for that, and we end up placing in the company certain challenges and goals to apply those concepts so that people feel a little bit more close to those challenges. So the challenge of AI, we have seen that recently in two cases. In Rodasa Bespi, the application of AI and innovation in basic sanitation services. So those are roads that are receiving more, that are highlighted more. So here there's been initiatives that have to do with education and health, but particularly with the intent to sort of level, say, the health and the education from the government, the public health and education, to more of a level where the private health and education is. So there's a lot of initiatives there, a lot to do still, but I think that at least here in Peru, we have been moving that a lot. I would love to be a primary healthcare, to see primary healthcare be an axis of innovation, because just the sanitation management in primary healthcare that could avoid so many issues that then end up having an impact in the rest of the system. Do we have time for another question, or nobody's telling anything? Oh, perfect, then we can go if you don't mind, and then we finish this conversation, which is very interesting so far. So since this is a petit comité, if you have a question, you can raise your hands. Do we have time? Yes? Okay. Okay, I just wanted to finish with concrete logics. Examples, you have given us so many, thank you so much. But if you had to identify a case of a startup, scale up that have provided a specific value to a PPP and how the relation has been structured, I think that's a good way to finish this panel. So, two cases actually that I've seen recently. One that improves efficiency of the PPPs, and another one that improves the competitivity of it in new tenders. And that was very interesting. A regulator determined that the service providing of basic sanitation had a new factor of quality. In that factor of quality, one of the important points was the quality of the asphalt after making some kind of interventions. So because many times they do the asphalt that breaks and they are not well repaired, and that was great because the startup selected uh, brought the concept of overization, but was already present in specific cases in Chile in 2006 of using the users, the people, as sort of evaluators of the public services. So, for example, if you have the repairment of a water supply, before paying to the service supplier that is repairing, you pay a bill, the user that is going to bring an alert. If you can bring a picture of the quality of the pavement, and it's very interesting because we had so many numbers. There is an average of attending, depending on the time where the request is done, of 14 minutes. In 14 minutes, we have a return about the quality of the pavement, and now with the use of AI, when you get that picture with the AI, you already know if it's very high, if there is a level with the prior asphalt it's not very comfortable, and if you approve or not the payment to the service supplier in 50 minutes, and eventually you are able to see what they have not done properly. So we have a better response time. You reduce the negative means, the claims of the users. You reduce CO2 in like 230 tons, and the costs. Many times you need a new team to actually evaluate. So it was very interesting how you can use the users as evaluators. And that is something that we can use in the PPP, because the public administration takes so long to hire or to have a response to a service, when the user can give us a response in 14 minutes, because and it's a problem with the public administration because they're not able to respond as rapidly. I think that that is very important for PPPs, and I think that the concessionary companies are not going to be able to resolve that internally. We need the users, which is such an important thing with technology, to have this capillarity. And something I saw recently was a startup that identified a service that a concessionary company was not leveraging, which was a treatment of the sewage of not domestic sources, the one that is in the network. And they gave a proposal. The concessionary company said, no, that is not worth doing. It's not a lot of money, but it's nice. It's nice. I like it. And they accepted the challenge. Having the startup make a test to identify. The startup identified 8,000 KPIs as the concessionaire was not assisting. Or clients actually that the concessionaire was not assisting. So there was new clients that would bring an additional income to the concessionaire company with the treatment of industrial sewage, not domestic sewage. So then there was a tender, and that made the concessionaire be more competitive in the tender, because they added the consideration of not just the traditional income of the fee of the domestic sanitation that we all pay, but they knew that in that region they could increase an accessory income of X, and that way they were able to win a tender because they acknowledged that through that startup. We wouldn't be. I wish we could replicate the same case in all of Latin America. Wouldn't that be great? Well, we actually have a very nice case in Chile with Banco Estado. Banco Estado is the bank which is similar to the Banco de la Nación, sort of the national bank, right? Where all of the companies are supposed to open a company, they have to, even though they might not use it, for some payments, like tax payments, are done through that platform. So Banco Estado was very interested in opening an open innovation program for different business lines. One of them being microfinances for the small companies. And there was a scouting of startups, and in the end, they selected one, TPAX, which offered a management of the microfinances. Is a platform for the management of microfinances that is going to help small entrepreneurs to manage through an app the cash flows and the basic management of the company finances. And they did a concept trial, they worked with a few clients, and in the end the bank is actually opted to create an agreement through which they integrate these TPAX capabilities in the app of the bank that they handle and the bank online, in order to provide that service of microfinances and have a whole program of accompanying or follow-up education in parallel to providing those kind of tools. So that, saying this vertical of microfinances that they were handling, that is very interesting, because what happens, and actually it was something that I think that is recurring with this kind of bank, which is super traditional. while at a fintech level that there's been a revolution, particularly in Latin America, in private banking with open banking, that this kind of bank, which is from the government, are just catching up by adopting these kind of technologies. And the interesting thing here is that the initiatives are already arising for working with startups and be able to integrate these kind of solutions in their core, which is actually very hard to manage because these are very hard services. So that is one case that we have worked with last year, and that in about a year, less than a year, is already evolving from being a POC to being an integrated service. And now, Ricardo, to finish an example. Ricardo, to finish an example of a startup technology in a PPP.
Initially, although we have thought about these strategies, we are studying these phases. We haven't reached this PPP scenario. Again, we mentioned this during the previous panel, the PMO, government to government, these days that we have been working on. We're going to start with this, but mainly from the examples that we have up to this date, we have identified that usually for these projects, the information volumes are mm, ha- we have a lot of tiers of information, whether they are printed. We have so we thought, how can we digitalize all of this process? Maybe having this in a not just in a PDF, but we need like a flow from who is elaborating this, who is reviewing this. So everything is digitalized. So we've been working with the local companies that have these kind of processes in terms of digital transformation designs, studies and designs of projects. And this is another thing that I really like, because from all the companies, all the projects that we have the Jorge Chavez Airport that is going to be implemented, and with it has a design that is going to break the paradigm with the citizen participation. For example, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this way, we have the dates, and this has been possible because we had this participation tool that allow us to receive information through the cell phones. You can ask the neighbor, seller from the market, what do you think about this project? How would you like this to be? And this kind of information with the engineering studies are able to be digitalized. And what we have perceived is that, for example, they don't need this tree, they need a safe park. And this relationship one-to-one that could not be conventional at all in comparison with other projects. It is reasonable, especially when we're building this kind of infrastructure, because we can incorporate the urban uh, importance, the landscapes, etc. So with this, you're kind of applying the open innovation, right? So I just want to thank you very much, and I have 3 bullet points. First, the incentive logics. We have a company that need to generate value, and because they are not just doing this for the check, we need to generate the value. We need about the investment logics, we have to know the ecosystem. We have to make the ecosystem work, both for the public part when we are working on tenders, and the private when we're managing. And this internal capacity of the company, we need to be able to generate this open innovation and have this relationship with the new suppliers. I hope that this was interesting for you, and we hope to have new events like this, such as PPP Americas. And we're now going to take the group picture. Thank you very much. And also, thank you very much, Natalia. She's here on the corner. She helped us organize this panel, and she helped us with the conversation today. Thank you very much for being here.